Stop the cap.
So the other day, uh, a troll came onto my page, and I guess he's one of the followers of T. Dessalines. And I saw maybe on comment a month ago where somebody tried to compare me to the brother. And I'm in terms of our approaches to certain topics, I'm assuming, and I haven't listened to a whole bunch of his comments. It's just the links that people will send me, and I'll watch the video. And for the most part, I agree. He reminds me of Mr. Holopsism. Um, in terms of his views. Um, but anyway, the guy came over and he was bitching and whining, talking about Palestine, because I have a few videos talking about Palestine and Israel and how the Israelis, I was like, what did you expect on October 7th? I mean, you got those people living in the open air prison. You got the marginalized and oppressed. I mean, hell, if I was them, I would fuck you up. If that's all I had to look forward in life is basically, living in squalor, like, nah, I'd probably be on some wild shit too. Right. But we all know that both Israel, which I've talked about, with their giving the Ethiopian women Depo-Provera, the way that they treat the Ethiopians, even though they brought them there, that whole that ploy that they tried to, after they got caught with the Depo-Provera, um, they came up with a black Miss Israel 6 months later. They got caught in January, and they 6 months later, oh look, we recognize true Ethiopian African beauty, right? And Israel's this ethno state, right? And then when you go over to the Palestinians, which Palestinians fall underneath the freaking category of um, Arab, right? We know about the anti-blackness in the Arab world. We know about Arabs calling black people Abid and Abid, right? We get into it with the Egyptians, and we see all the racist stuff that they say when we talk about ancient Egypt was a rooted in a black civilization, and then slowly over time other groups came in, mixed and mingled, and all that other shit. But the root of the culture is in black African civilization, right? And you see how they talk crazy, right? But this troll came over, and I ended up blocking him, because one thing I'm not going to tolerate is I'm not going to tolerate somebody who accuses me of shit in videos or accuses me of saying or not saying things that has been said several times, many times, in many different videos. You know what I mean? Like the brother was coming at me on some stupid shit about, oh, you don't address the Arabs, and I hate these little follower ass niggas that don't think for themselves. They get so charged listening to somebody and then try to run around and attack other people. And I'm like, nigga, you don't listen to my fucking comment. Get the fuck off my page. You know what I mean? I'm the primary individual that is spoken up for black people about the anti-blackness in the Arab world. I got a video. What's the title of the video? It's one of my more popular videos, which is Dear Black Muslim. You know what I'm saying? Talking about and a lot of that came from, um, once I started dealing with, arguing with black Christians about Christianity, I had to deal with the black Muslims, because Africa is split in half when it comes to Christianity and Islam. I'm like, both of them had slavery. Both of them, were mistreating black people and stealing us, from our lands. Both of them. And then I got to address the Somalis, because the Somalis get stupid with it. Like the Somalians, they got the colorism and the featureism, and oh, we're not Bantu, and oh, these people are Jair, and oh, we're different, and Somalis were never enslaved, which is cap. Even Somalian scholars have acknowledged that that's how they became Muslim. And then once the Arabs realized that they were converting too many of their property to Islam, then they went down, to the Tanzania, to the Swahili coast and down in Tanzania, and started bringing people out of Zanzibar. Because in Islam, once a person is a Muslim, you can't enslave them like that. Right? So they made it a point, like, okay, we're gonna go to another part of Africa and make sure that you don't enslave these people. We're just here strictly for business. Okay. I have talked extensively about that, about the brainwashing and the Arabization of the Negro, which is no different than the Europeanization, the Negropians, of West African, or excuse me, of West Africa. And in any event, I was watching, you know, one of the clips. I was like, what is with all this talk? Like, people have been talking about the anti-blackness in the Arab world. Why is all this shit, coming up now? And obviously it's because of the whole, black people, caping for Palestine, because, we recognize, what's going on in Palestine, has some parallels, with the oppression and the experience, of African Americans, right? But you can't lose sight of the fact that Arabs have been on some anti-black shit, and Jewish people have been on some anti-black shit. I mean, I like the way that Umar Johnson has addressed it, because it was a bunch of, Palestinians that got on, that were trying to get on black leadership, right? We get it from the Jews. They start whining and bitching, right? And then we get it from, the Arabs, and they start whining and bitching. And it's like, none of you have gone before the United Nations and spoken on our behalf, and challenged, the American system, as it pertains for reparations for African Americans. None of them have done anything, political, for African Americans. You know what I mean? The people were talking, like, Umar Johnson brought up the whole thing with I like what he said. He was like, they got a mural of George Floyd in Palestine on a wall, and he's like, I can paint too. You know what I mean? And then even when it comes to, the Jewish people, yes, there have been Jewish people in America, and, they were a part of the civil rights movement. But, some of that, had to do with, again, there were things in the civil rights movement that were directly connected to, benefiting Jewish people. I mean, the civil rights bill is not just about, black people, or, it's like color, creed, religion, whatever your ethnic background is. There's a whole bunch of shit in there that Jewish people stood to benefit from. It wasn't just on the basis of blackness. Okay. You had, James Baldwin talk about, a lot of these Jewish slumlords. You know what I mean? And then even talking about, these Jewish slumlords going in, they buy up properties in a particular area, right? And buy it up, right? Let it go into disrepair and then decay, and then they sell it to the city, and the city comes through and purchase it through eminent domain. And they make their money that way. There's all type of stuff. They don't care about, empowering the black community. Right? The black community has always been in a environment and a place for people to come in and exploit, and especially people who are seen as secondarily, American citizens, that either come here as migrants or come here as people with dual citizenships. When they set up shop, the cheapest place to operate and function and get on your feet is to exploit the black community. And both the Arab and both the Jew, have done this. Right? This is not any sort of secret, you see. But anyway, listening to Neferkari T. Dessalines, right? I was listening to his video, and he's going through all this stuff. He does a lot of research and puts up the clips and images of, and talking about people's comments and everything. And it's always, what I always notice about the types that are like Neferkari, they always kind of miss the forest for the trees, right? They always kind of miss that. And they don't step back and look at the bigger picture. They talk, he's talking about, black people, not standing up to the Arab and always having this sort of, just not challenging the Arab, not standing up for themselves, and just how, weak that is and how weak that looks. And I'm gonna say this, first off, again, the biggest issue that you're gonna run into, and the main reason why people don't give this shit up, is because of religion. Okay, whether it's Christianity or whether you're talking about, the Arabization of the Negro, and then you're talking about Islam, you're going to run into the same problem, because the white European Christians have aligned themselves with the concept of God and divinity, and the Arab has done the same thing, aligned himself with God and divinity. So many black people in Africa, and all of their simplistic mindset, somehow believe that their path to God is either through the white man or through the Arab. That is what you have to challenge, and that is what you have to tear down when it comes to the way that black people think, especially on the continent of Africa. Okay. One of the biggest issues, and I talked about this before, and I actually had a video get flagged for, like, I don't even know what it was. It was like hate speech or something like that, because I said one of the biggest problems in Africa is too diverse. Okay. It's too diverse. And this is I talked about this. Africa is a vertically oriented continent. Every other continent is horizontal. So Africa is a continent that has different climate zones, and typically people from different climate zones, whether you're a tropical people and you're in the jungles, or whether you're a desert people and you're in like the Sahara or the Sahel, those people tend not to interact with one another. If you look at a map of all the language groups in Africa, I mean, it's just too many damn languages. And the problem with having too many damn languages and too many damn cultures is the fact that you don't have a codified, unified front. This is the benefit of conquering and conquest and rape and pillage and whatnot, because all of that happened in every other place around the world, whether it was the Mongols, whether it was the what do you want to call it, the Ming dynasty, the Qing dynasty, or the Franks in Europe, or the British, or the Romans, or the Greeks, or the Russians, right, or the Turks, right? I mean, all those people, like from Turkey all the way to, like, I don't even know, freaking Turkmenistan, and some of all the way deep into Asia, Kazakhstan and shit like that. All those people speak Turkic languages. I mean, they can understand each other. Which is going back to what Colonel or is it General what's his name, McGregor, right? He brought that up in one of his videos, talking about that. That's why the president of Turkey. That's why, his mobilization, around Israel is very dangerous, because not only do you have the Muslim world, mobilizing, but you also have the Turkic world mobilizing, or the people that speak, Turkic languages mobilizing. And see that, whenever you talk about these empires, the Ottoman Empire, the British Empire, all of these places that rule a particular area for any particular time, what do? They go in there and they strip the people of whatever culture they have. This is what happened to the essentially the Egyptians, right? Because the Arabs went in there in the 7th century, and they basically Islamized and Arabized the entire region. And despite the fact that ancient Egyptians were not Muslim, right? So because Africa never had a unified front, any sort of ruler that just swept across the continent of Africa, because we didn't have that, Africa is completely disorganized. Completely disorganized. Africa is like if you took like 10 dice and you shook them up and you threw them on the table, and each one landed on a different number. That is Africa. Everywhere outside of Africa has essentially been at some point in the past was completely dominated by one group or ruler, and they went in there and they said this is going to be the language, this is going to be the religion, this is going to be the culture, and this is how you're going to function and operate, right? And even when you had even some of these subgroups that have maintained their identity, like example, like the Ukrainians have been dominated by Russians, but they still maintain their language, but there's much overlap between the Ukrainians and the Russians, right? Africa as a continent doesn't really have a situation like that, except for now it's dominated by what? External powers. You have the Eastern Africa, which is dominated by Arabization of the Negro, and then you have West Africa, which is basically dominated by the French and the Portuguese and the British, right? That's what you have in West Africa. You have the Francophone nations. You have the Angola, which is a Portuguese speaking nations, and then you have Nigeria and South Africa, which are English speaking regions. There was no one unified African dominant force that dominated the continent, and codified the culture and codified the language and codified the identity, like you see in other regions of the world, like in Korea, North Korea and South Korea. As much as they oppose each other, they both speak Korean and can understand each other. You go to Japan, they all speak Japanese on that island, right? And they all read the Japanese language. The only way you can get that to happen initially is rape, pillage, and plunder. You dominate. You teach the kids in the schools to speak your language and your cultural identity, and to read your language, and that's how you end up with a identity for a people. Africa has not had that. I think I've made that point clear now. And so when you look at Islam, when you look at the Arabized blacks, when they look at Islam is very easy to engage in and participate in because it's standardized. It's a standard. Arabization is a standardized culture. You see the Arabic letters. Okay, okay, I gotta. If I can read that and I can understand that, then you can navigate throughout the Arab world. If you can speak Arabic, you can go to Egypt. You can go to Mecca. You can go to Saudi Arabia. You can go to Dubai. You can go to Bahrain. You can just go anywhere you want. Iraq. Okay, you speak Arabic. They understand you. You can get things done. Okay. Can you do that in Africa? Can I jump around Africa speaking, one African language and all the other African peoples are going to? No, I cannot do that. I can go around and I can speak English and I can navigate a bunch of countries. I can go around and I can speak French and I can navigate a bunch of countries. But there isn't one language, one written language, one word, one spoken word that all of Africans understand. So when you want to challenge, and I'm talking to Neferkari right now, when you want to challenge the idea of Africans, not being able to unify underneath one cohesive concept of being Black African, that is primarily the reason why. With the Arabization or the Christianization, okay, they got a book, and the book says this is the God, this is the written word, and this is how you are to behave. And Africans don't have that. Africans on the continent don't have that. They got a bunch of ancient religions, spookyisms, and I'm saying spookyisms disrespectfully because that is what they are, because they haven't been codified. They haven't been written down. They haven't been put in text. This is the laziness of the African in not writing down his history, but speaking his history. This is the same reason why the Native American got wiped out. Because the Native American couldn't communicate with other Native Americans about, hey, we got this white man on our shores coming in here trying to fuck some shit up. What are we going to do about it? Can't communicate with them. Can't organize against outside forces when you can't communicate, when you haven't had a dominant force, move through the continent of Africa, rape, pillage, and plunder, right? Because it's going to be an ugly side to that. And then on the back end, you get the what would be considered the beautiful side of that, where you end up with Wakanda, and you end up with a people that have one unified identity, right? And that's what they share. So when somebody else comes through and tries to go knock knock, I'm coming up in here, they can't do that because you can quickly and swiftly organize against them. And I have gotten into several arguments with Africans about this point, and I would like, as long as Africans don't have a unified identity, they will always be divided. They will always be, conquered. They will always be unable to respond swiftly and effectively to outside forces. So I don't know what language black people want to agree to, or what sort of organized faith black people want to agree to, but Africans are always going to be at a disadvantage as long as they're adopting the identity of groups outside of the continent of Africa. It's always going to be, a problem. You have to have a codified identity that everybody recognizes. I mean, fucking, the Jewish people of Israel, I give them credit because they brought back a 2,000-year old language. They were not speaking Hebrew, when they were in Europe, and they were in Ukraine and Poland and Germany and Russia and whatnot. They were speaking Yiddish. Yiddish is a combination of it's Hebrew and like High German, but they weren't speaking Hebrew as you hear them speaking Hebrew in Israel. They taught that in the schools. The only people who knew that shit were like, the what do you call them? The Jewish priest or whatever they're called. Okay, that the dudes with the boxes on their head. They brought that back. So, is there any organized effort on the continent of Africa to bring to come up with a language or a written language? I know that there's been some scholars who have tried to come up with like the new modernized written languages, for Africa. But again, it's too separated. It's all these different countries and whatnot, and Africans try to take the model of Europe and be like, well, Europe is diverse and Europe has all these, different, different language and different, nation states, but all those nation states in Europe, they independently, have, power. And then when they all, come together to their little UN meetings and whatnot, I don't know what language they speak at their meetings. I'm assuming they most likely all speak English, right? Because of the British Empire. They just, it's like black people would be too much in their feelings about the shit. Ethiopians would be like, no, Ethiopian should be, whatever they speak, this should be the language for the continent of Africa, right? Or the Nigerians, they would, no, Igbo should be the language. There'd be way too many egos. I can already see it. The Africans would be too, in their feelings about what should be the dominant language for the continent of Africa, so that they can, go to, these intracontinental meetings and have discussions. We could argue that English is probably already the language, or French, one of the two, right? But that can be problematic when you're saying that you're trying to break away, from these groups, because all they do is come into the continent and exploit. Same with the Arabs, right? You got these Arabs speaking, in Sudan, you go to Khartoum, they speak Arabic. So this is not an easy solution. Neferkari can whine, bitch, cry, complain, until you get black people out of the religions. You know what I mean? This is what it's going to be. This is what you're going to see. And I understand you got people that are not even, they're not even Muslim, and they'll, they're out here, caping for Palestine and all that other stuff. I think it's fucked up. I think it's fucked up what was done. You know what I mean? And I do draw parallels, between, Nat Turner's response and what happened on October 7th. I'm like, what do you think is going to happen? When eventually people are going to get sick and tired of being sick and tired and being marginalized. And, basically it was crazy. It's just the way that the Israelis are treating the Palestinians is no different than how the Israelis were treated in Germany, when they were put into the Warsaw ghettos and shit like that. Like, I'm like, had to walk around with the Jude patch. I'm like, that's crazy how the oppressed have become the oppressors. I'm like, if y'all should be fucking with anybody or taking anybody's land, they should have taken half of Germany. But we all know history didn't play out that way. But as it pertains to black African peoples, nah, we're entirely too diverse. Entirely too diverse. You need to have a book that says this is how we operate, this is what we're about, right? This is what we believe in, right? And there has to be a whole, mythology, and that's the funny thing about, like, even today, like, that's the whole problem with Islam, because Islam, Islam just basically makes one big fat call to violence, because Islam comes through and says, we are the final and last word of God, right? So there will be no more revelations, there will be no more nothing else, right? So somebody, if black Africans were able to organize and come up with their own concept of religion and divinity and everything else, even other black people would be quick to say that, hey, that shit was fake. Then again, with Islam, when Islam came about, there were Arabs that they didn't subscribe to that. The Quraysh, if you read the Quran, the Quraysh, were basically the Arabs before Islam that they rejected, Islam, because there were only basically the Quraysh and Jewish people in that area at that time, and so the Prophet Muhammad, had a long way to go, before, it was accepted, so I'm just saying, I feel like black people don't really value anything that comes from black people because of the ideas of self-hatred and the Arabization and the Christianization and the Europeanization. And so, think about it. Like, we got divestors. Like, what other group of men have divestors? You see what I'm saying? Just to give themselves a damn title. But nah, he's got a video, Neferkari's got a video where he's got this guy sitting in front of a chair, and there's Arabic letters on the top of the chair. I'm like, there you go. Like, there's a whole like I'm not even Muslim, and I know, like, how I would have to dress in order to, like, present myself as an Arab man. You see what I'm saying? Like that's what at the African, like, how do you present yourself as an African man? Nobody knows. It's all over the place, right? But to present yourself as a Arab man, you know what I mean? I know I gotta, wrap my head, wear the kufiya, right? Have my high water pants on, right? Grow a beard, right? What else? What else would I have? Rocking, probably, wear the all white shit like they do in Dubai or something like that. We all know what it looks like to be an Arab, right? You know what I'm saying? Walk around. When I greet people, I say assalamu alaikum, right? Right? Like we all know what it is to, like, be an Arab, right? No matter where you go, being an Arab is something that people are familiar with. It makes it easy to follow, easy to get with the program, easy to feel like you're a part of something. You can't say the same thing about Africa. You can't say the same thing about an African. How do they operate in Mali? Different than how they operate in Chad. How do they operate in Sudan? Different than how they operate in Nigeria. How do they operate in Burkina Faso? Different than they operate in Senegal. How do they operate in Ethiopia? Different than they operate in South Africa, so on and so forth. You see? Different. So there's not one cohesive identity to follow. And this is always going to present a problem. So until, that gets addressed, and I'm not blaming or putting that on Neferkari, but I'm saying until that gets addressed, you're always going to have these problems. Just letting you know. You're always going to have these problems. You're always going to have black people who are, filled with self-hate or inferiority complex, or, they can't even just speak on some shit and then back off because they realize, like, hey, these people don't fuck with us. You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah, that's some foul shit that they're doing over there. But I'm not gonna speak too loudly on it. Why? Because I know at the end of the day, those people don't fuck with us like that. I know that if the tide shift, you know what I mean? The next thing you know, the conversation is they're running around calling black people abid. You know what I mean? Or that Jewish man that was screaming, at that Jewish woman talking about, you know what I mean? She's married to, a slave, or married to, I think you said, the N word, but in Hebrew, you know what I'm saying? Like, so again, this ain't our fight, and there's no real reason for us to speak on it. This shit literally has nothing to do with us. But uh, the primary concern, truth be told, is I'd say it's two things. I'd say, it's how people react to this. You know, black people should be paying attention to, because you know that sort of reaction or lack of response, you know what I mean? We recognize that it's very similar to how we would be treated in a situation. That's the first part. And then the second part is, being dragged, as, America, or as American citizens, as African Americans, into a global conflict. One that will affect, quality of life. Like if America has World War III, I mean, trust me, they ain't gonna be trying to talk about reparations. I mean, they're not trying to talk about it now, but they most certainly won't. Oh, we ain't got no money. We got no money. It's always they ain't got no money, right? But they got billions of dollars to send to Ukraine and billions of dollars to send to Israel, right? So, um, you know, understanding geopolitics, which is something that black people suck at. Black people really suck at. They're more concerned about white Jesus and righteousness and justice and right and wrong and good and bad. Again, more focused on the afterlife. Black people are, than they are on current events and geopolitics. That's another problem. I mean, there's problems on top of problems in terms of, our inability, to critically think about how to do things that are in our collective best interests. And again, Africans, they don't, Africans themselves, forget how Africans feel about African Americans. Africans themselves don't have, any sort of attitude towards improving the quality of life for the man standing next to them. I mean, I criticize Nigerians heavily about this. We got 73% of the Nigerian population lives in abject poverty and shit. You know what I mean? And you have an oil rich country. And then you get these Africans, especially the Nigerians, they'll go to Europe or they'll come to the Americas and everything. And they think highly of themselves because they're like, oh, I'm at the top of the social hierarchy in Nigeria. And it's like, nigga, your whole country is associated with dust. Your whole country is associated with poverty and people not having. You know what I mean? I mean, even when it comes to the ASMR community and getting a shave in Africa, people are like worried about catching HIV, and the comment sections are always, something about HIV and, oh, are those razors clean and everything, because they don't think Africa is hygienic. And the only way that you're going to get, if you want people to respect Africa, Africans as a collective of people in any particular country need to have a high standard of living. They need to not be living in squalor, and children need to not be walking around with no goddamn shoes on their feet. And the roads need to be paved and the infrastructure needs to be maintained. If Africans want to be viewed in the same light or the same manner as a group of people to be respected. Okay? But Africans always fail at that because Africans are, and their leadership are always more concerned about coming up with some stupid ass communist fucking statue that looks like it was made by freaking Stalin or Lenin himself, like that big ass goofy ass statue that has nothing about it that's African, in Senegal, the dumbest, most wasteful amount of money, right? And then the whole statue is surrounded by, if you look at the neighborhoods around the shit, it's surrounded by squalor and trash on the ground and people living in little shacks and huts and shit like that. And the motherfucker thinks that thing would establish pride. You know what I mean? I would have given a white boy working in the Marvel universe that drew cartoons, in anime for freaking Wakanda, for the Black Panther to come up with a better statue than the fucking the Senegal leadership went off and got them Koreans to make that goddamn statue. It's shit like that. You know what I mean? Africans, I don't know. It's like, Africans need to, like, they don't have like the global view. And seriously speaking, Africans, in my opinion, you need to sit down and have conversations with African Americans, right? Even though we got our own problems, and some people would say our vision is tainted, but our vision about the world and the scope of the world is much greater than yours, much greater than the Africans. And again, when y'all do shit on your own soil, you know what I mean? Y'all think like the world is viewing it this way, and trust us, we can tell you the world is not viewing it that way. The world is viewing it like, look at these dusty niggas and the dusty misappropriation of funds that they just did. They think that them going off and building a statue actually means something, a statue that has no African stylistic art whatsoever about it. They think that is a symbol of their greatness, when the majority of people in their country live in fucking squalor and don't even have flushing toilets or running water, you know what I mean? Or they have rolling power outages and shit like that. Like, fix your motherfucking infrastructure. So, Black Africa has problems on top of problems on top of problems. And I'm just one man, speaking on it. But you in my opinion, you got to dive deeper into this, codifying the culture, codifying what Africans are about. Again, whether it's a United States of Africa, but an African identity. Africa needs to become Wakanda. That is the only way that it's going to survive. They're going to have to adapt. They're going to have to toss, much of their current identities into, the trash bin. You know what I mean? And I'm saying preserve what you can, but put it in a museum. You know what I'm saying? Like, just like how the Chinese with their, what is it, the Great Journey or whatever, the Long Walk, whatever the fuck it was, with Mao Zedong. What was that damn thing called? Mao Zedong, the Great Leap Forward. There you go. The Great Leap Forward, where he went into, he freaking, just basically came up with the Communist Party. Again, that's why Taiwan is there. Those are the people that fled and they moved to the island of Taiwan. And, they now you have the Taiwan versus China. And China's like, no, we're going to unify and all this shit. Yeah, that's the fucked up part about having one unified front. That's what do you think the Chinese are doing with the Uyghurs, out there in the western provinces, of China? Okay, to have a unified front, have one cultural identity. That way they can move as one cohesive unit. The Africans are still running around trying to be, individuals. Everybody wants to be the point guard. It's like, we need somebody to run forward and center and, power forward and all that. Nah, Africans don't understand that. But I hope I've made my point clear about what the problems are, when it comes to, like, to me, Neferkari, I'm like, you looking at the superficial problem and you're bitching about it from the standpoint of superficiality. You have to go down to the core of the issue, which is an identity issue. And that identity issue, we can talk about, oh, well, black people need to give this up. What I've realized over the years is you can't ask people to give something up without replacing it with something. Okay? It's just like when people leave religion, they don't typically just leave religion and just immediately go into atheism. No, they'll go into like some sort of self-help book or something like that, which basically serves the same purpose. It's just a distilled version. What does religion give you? Hope, comfort, and inspiration. That's what religion gives you. And that's what they go in that direction. And but they're not going to do it without something. And so I don't know who the architects of the continent of Africa are, to come up with some sort of cohesive cultural identity and make that shit look good. Just the same way as, black inner city drug dealers make drug dealing and the whole lifestyle that surrounds drug dealing, they make that shit look good. Which is why we got all these young black men in America that want to be gangsters and rappers and in the streets and all that other stuff. Because again, the way it's promoted, they make that shit look good. And that has become an identity that around the world, many people try to imitate. I mean, you got the Koreans over there, they pop locking like crazy. They break dancing and everything else. You know what I'm saying? So again, the African American identity, it is an identity. But and I understand we live in a country, it's not a, we're kind of underneath the umbrella of what it is to be an American. But I'm saying Africa as a continent needs to sort that out. And they haven't sorted that out. And all that's going to happen, especially with the Arabs, with the way that their shit is codified, all that's going to happen is people are going to lean towards that because it's easy for them to operate and function in that more than it's easy for them to function in some unidentifiable, nebulous concept of what it is to be an African, which there isn't one. And that's the problem. Anyway, that's all I got to say. That's my video. SWP out. Don't forget to comment, share, like, and subscribe.